So guys, our focus today will be basically to discuss what we call your price mechanism, the demand and supply chapter. So there are terms and questions which comes to about, like discussing equilibrium and disequilibrium in the market. So I want to sort of talk about quickly equilibrium and disequilibrium, and then how can demand and supply factors change that equilibrium. So a lot of these questions you can see are focusing on somewhat equilibrium and disequilibrium and then demand and supply factors. So let's just quickly in today's class try to address a lot of these questions. So let's pick a question, for example. Uh, let's look at this one, 217, which says is that um, explain how equilibrium price and quantity change to allocate resources with this successful advertising campaign for a normal good. Or let's look at this one, distinguish between the concepts of market equilibrium and disequilibrium and show how what happens in a free market when disequilibrium exists. So I want to kind of like answer all of these equilibrium and disequilibrium questions. So in these equilibrium and disequilibrium questions, we need to first establish what do we mean by equilibrium, what do we mean by disequilibrium, and how can we solve the problem. So if we draw the demand and supply diagram, guys, um, you have, this is my demand and supply, and let's say this is my price P naught, and the quantity is Q naught, right? Quantity and price. And we say, when we say equilibrium, we means quantity demanded equals quantity supply. And the reason why we call it equilibrium is because we say there is no tendency for price to change. So there is no tendency for price to change, means there is no reason price will change. So price doesn't need to change because of the fact that you at P naught, your quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Now, if there is not an equilibrium, if what happens? Well, a disequilibrium can exist because of either the price to be too high, like P1, or price to be too low, like P2. Why are they called disequilibrium? And we can say this, they're called disequilibrium because if you look at this, guys, if the price is above P naught, like P1, then you can explain in your answer, it's just that at P naught, your QS, at P1, your QS is greater than QD. So at P1, if your QS is greater than QD, one could say there is a surplus that takes place. Quantity supplied is more than quantity demanded, there's a surplus, and that surplus will lead to what you call unsold stock, and therefore, let me write this, unsold stock, and therefore a producer may need to lower price. Why does he need to lower price? Because the price is too high. At P1, the price is too high, therefore no one is buying your good, you have an unsold stock, you got to lower price. You keep on lowering price till QD becomes equal to QS. In other words, you reach to point P naught. Similarly, if you are at P2, you can say the price is too low as QD is greater than QS, which means there is a shortage, which means when there's a shortage, when QD is greater than QS, you will see the price has to go up in order for QD to become equal to QS. Why will price need to go up? Because right now, QD is more than QS, which means people are like wanting to buy the good, but the good is not there. So the producer will keep on increasing price, and that may result in ultimately has to go back to P naught. Only at P naught, there is no tendency for price to change because QD and QS are equal. But above P naught, QS was greater than QD. Below P naught, QD was greater than QS. At P naught, they're equal. Got it? So you need to first, in your first paragraph, for all of these questions that are asking about equilibrium and disequilibrium, talk about what do we mean by equilibrium, where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, and therefore there's no tendency for price to change. and talk about why a price above or price below may not be equilibrium before we talk about anything else. Are we good? Any questions before we move on? Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then we talk about the idea that what can make the equilibrium change? Because look at these, a lot of these questions, we can see this, that a lot of these questions are asking about what will successful advertising do for a normal good to your equilibrium, right? Or for example, uh, what happens in a free market when disequilibrium exists? We kind of answered this question, by the way. We first talked about the concept of market equilibrium and disequilibrium, and we talked about how disequilibrium can exist if the price is too high or price is too low, and therefore what will make the price go back to the equilibrium would be the fact that there's a shortage or a surplus, and therefore that will make it go back. Make sense? And then this kind of question, what will successful advertising do? We can say this kind of a question. I'm answering question number 4 now. In this, we can draw a diagram like this one. The price is P naught, quantity is Q naught, right? And let's say the government, there is successful advertising that is taking place. If there is successful advertising taking place, the demand for the good will go up, right? But we need to talk about the equilibrium. Initially, the equilibrium was at point A. Suddenly, when the demand go up, you can see this, guys, supply is still at A, okay, at P naught. Quantity supplied is at Q naught, but quantity demanded will be more at, for example, Q dash. In other words, can I say a rise in demand results in, because of successful advertising, a rise in demand results in suddenly a disequilibrium to happen because the quantity demanded is more than quantity supplied. Makes sense? And therefore, I'm so sorry guys, somebody's waiting. Sorry. So quantity demanded is more than quantity supplied, and therefore you will say that in this case, the price will have a tendency to rise till we come to point at P1 or point C, where you will reach equilibrium. Okay. So in this question, we talked about a successful advertising can make the demand to rise, and therefore there will be a momentarily a very small moment of disequilibrium where the price will begin to rise and we come back to equilibrium at point P1. Got it? Does that make sense, guys?
Sir, I had a question.
Please.
Sir, can you explain us like how to structure the question? Like first, should we give the definition or should we
This
then
question,
make the graph?
Yeah. So in this question, you know, like if we can look at let's look at this one. In this question, there are some key terms that we can look at. First, you can talk about equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity happens where you talk about how QD equals QS. Okay, and you can have a discussion about first part of the paragraph would be all about why is equilibrium happening at QD and QS, and then you talk about why above QD or below above equilibrium price or below equilibrium price it won't be equilibrium. Then you talk about normal good. You can define normal good. You can define normal good is as one where you can say this normal good is where when your income go up, demand go up. And when there is successful advertising campaign, demand curve will shift to the right. So demand will increase, demand curve will shift to the right. And then you talk about how the last paragraph of yours should talk about how the demand will increase, how no longer P naught is the equilibrium price. And therefore, when the demand increases, there will be on the equilibrium price, there will be a shortage, and therefore a higher tendency for price to go up till we come to point C, where now QD becomes equal to QS again. Make sense? Ahad? Is that Ahad who was asking me? Who was asking me this question?
Sir Ziad.
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
sir. I understand now. Thank you so much.
Okay, sometimes the question is pretty structured, like let's look at this one. Distinguish between equilibrium and disequilibrium in the market for a good. Explain how equilibrium pricing equilibrium will change if there's a decrease in supply. So let's look at this one. The first part is exactly what we discussed. Like the first part of the question is exactly what we discussed so far. So there's no change whatsoever. But then what happens if there's a decrease in supply? In this question, first I will talk about why decrease in supply happens. Okay, why does it happen? It could be very reasons. For example, change in cost, uh, which can happen because of like productivity changes or technology. So you can mention some of the factors that can change supply. Uh, they are saying decrease in supply could be uh, cost of raw materials to go up, cost of raw materials or inputs to rise. Make sense? So you can talk about that. So what's the impact of this in terms of our diagram, guys? In terms of our diagram, there will be anyone who can tell me the answer. In terms of a diagram, how would we see
Sir,
that?
we can show an decrease in supply.
Okay, exactly. And what will happen at the equilibrium now? Old
So
equilibrium. What will
there
happen at the old?
so there will be more quantity demanded than supplied.
So let's look at this. So when there is a decrease in supply, uh, you will see the curve to shift backward, right? So this kind of thing will happen from S to, let's say, S dash, right? So at the equilibrium price, previously equilibrium was at point A, guys. So what will happen is this, that at the equilibrium, there will be uh, quantity demanded is here, quantity supplied is here. Isn't that true? So you will see uh, shortage to happen. Why? Because supply has gone down, quantity demanded is still at Q naught, and there will be therefore a tendency for price to increase to P1, and we will be at point C. Got it? Does that make sense, guys? Uh, so what I'm trying to say here is this, that when your supply fell, there is a shortage, a very momentarily, like you suffered a shortage, which made the price to go up till we come to P1, where there is an equilibrium that will come. Make sense? Are we good? So that is a set of answer for a lot of these questions that can come about equilibrium and disequilibrium and so on and so forth. Any questions, guys?
Sir, we call it rationing, right?
Yeah. We rationing is basically the allocation, yes, that happens, yes. Are we good? I have another set of questions now to discuss, which is to do with basically demand and supply factors. So one thing to prepare for, guys, is basically to prepare for, when you equilibrium and disequilibrium kind of questions. Okay, so you need to prepare for that kind of a thing. Are we good? Any questions, guys? Are we going to move on?
No, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Just 1 minute, guys. Actually, there are a lot more people still joining in. So, hi everyone who's joined. There's somebody called Galaxy Tab A. You must be somebody. Guys, we're doing AS. This is my AS class. Just in case if you are here for AS. Are you here for AS? Somebody also joined us. So Asim Ali also joined us. Asim, are you here for AS as well? AS Economics? I can't hear him. Okay, guys.
Can you, sir, can you please explain that how testing takes place?
Sorry, who's this?
Sir, it's Zan.
Then what do you want to know? Can you write that, Zen? Because there's a lot of sound issues at your end. Oh, rationing. Rationing basically, you know, the functions of prices. We'll discuss function of prices in a little while. But function of prices is basically one of the functions of prices is what we call rationing, which is basically allocation of goods and services. So let me explain what rationing basically means. So guys, for example, if a lot more people are demanding good, right? This would mean that the price will go up, and the price going up will give a signal to producers that this good is gaining demand, and therefore we should produce more of this good. So the idea of rationing basically means allocation or of resources, which happens in a free market economy through the price. Price signals the producer that there is a need to produce more of that good. Make sense? And that's exactly what rationing means. Rationing basically means how are we allocating or rationing resources among different users. Okay? Are we good?
Yes, sir.
Sir, can you please explain that again? I couldn't hear due to network issues.
Okay. I'm saying rationing basically is when, you know, like if the price goes up, let me write this down as well, just in case. When the price goes up, you will see producer will be like, hey, the price is going up. Maybe people are demanding more of the good. So price go up, it signals producers to produce more, and that basically can encourage producer to produce more, and that can make the supply to go up. But that basically means that a producer, when he looks at price, it signals him to produce more of the good, which means he's allocating more resources or rationing more resources to that use. So rationing basically means to allocate more resources. Got it?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Okay. So guys, uh, a lot of questions will be about, uh, you know, like factors affecting demand and supply, right? Factors affecting demand and supply. So quickly, I want to recap those factors that affect demand and supply. So that will be an important thing to look at. Okay. So when we look at factors affecting demand and supply, let's just quickly nail down all the factors which are demand factors and supply factors. So we know a quick recap of that. Demand factor could be, you know, like a rise in income. A rise in income could be a factor, because when the income go up, demand will go up, and basically that happens. Um, that happens due to you know, like if the good is if the good is normal in nature. If the good is normal in nature, whenever the income go up, demand will go up. The second factor we talk about that can make the demand will change could be your price of substitutes. Remember, if the price of substitutes go down, you know, like what will happen then? If the demand for substitute go down, your substitute becomes cheaper, then the demand for your good will go up. Isn't that true? The demand will go up um, because that will basically allow. Can you guys hear me properly? Sorry, guys.
Yes,
So
sir.
Okay. If the price of substitute fall, for example, let's say Coke and Pepsi, if Pepsi becomes cheaper, you will see the demand for Coke to fall as well. Why? Because if Pepsi becomes cheaper, people will switch to what you call it, Pepsi, and they will demand less of Coke. Uh, does that make sense, guys? Similarly, for example, when you look at your price of complements, if complements are goods which are consumed together, if complements go expensive, for example, let's say milk and tea, if milk becomes expensive, at least in Pakistan, you see a lot of people consume milk and tea together. They have tea with milk. So you might see demand for tea to go down in this case. Demand for tea to go down in this case. Does that make sense? So that could be another one. So there could be a rise in income, price of substitutes, price of complements. Then there are other factors like, for example, external factors. For example, weather. For example, like any other factor that you guys know which can make the demand to change?
So taste of fashion.
Yeah, very good. Taste or advertising could be also taste. That's when the demand can change. Any other factor, guys?
Sir, culture.
Culture could be, yeah, or population and culture can be other factors. Good job. So I want to show you now this one. Look at this one. Explain with the help of a diagram what happens in the market for a product when the price of substitutes increase, and how economists would measure the relationship between these products. So in this question, what they're saying is this, that you're given this question where they say what happens in the market for a product when the price of substitute increases. So the key word here is substitute. So first we define substitutes. Okay, so we define substitutes. What are substitutes? Substitutes are goods that are consumed that are in competition with each other. For example, Coke and Pepsi are substitutes to each other, and therefore they have a relationship where when the demand uh, when the demand for good A goes up, you may see, or when the price for good A goes up, then you can see the substitute, or rather, let's talk about Coke and Pepsi for simplicity. As the price of Coke goes up, demand for Pepsi will go up because people will now switch to a cheaper substitute, right? And how economists will measure the relationship of these goods. When they say measure the relationship, this becomes more of a YD question, because that's where we look at, XED question. That's where we look at your relationship between substitute and complement. So it's not truly a demand supply question, but if there was a question what happens in the market when the price of substitute increases, and if they didn't write this one and they write and how does it change equilibrium, we would have written that. I'm going to save the XED discussion for later. Okay, let's look at this one. Show how a new equilibrium position is established when there's a decrease in demand. So I'll talk about all the factors. First, I talk about equilibrium. So first paragraph will be about equilibrium. The second paragraph will be about factors that affect demand. And the third paragraph would be about the diagram where I'll show the demand is going down from D0 to D1, and demand goes down, price goes down, and also quantity supplied goes down. Okay, and you'll show that with the discussion that we just had about equilibrium.
Sir, sir, in question 6, like we need to give an example of a substitute good and like explain that example, like Coke and Pepsi.
Always try to give examples that can make your discussion easy, because if you're talking about good A, good B, rather than that you talk about Coke and Pepsi or milk and tea or something like that, like you talk about substitute complements in examples, it becomes easier. But choose examples which are common. Like Coke and Pepsi is a very common example, so that's a good example to give. Make sense?
Okay, sir.
Okay, so guys, let's look at this one. This is a good question to wrap up our discussion. Explain the factors that might cause a fall in demand for chocolate, and discuss the extent to which chocolate producers have the power to stop this happening. So this is a 12-mark question. A 12-mark question basically means we also need to write evaluation, which is either limitations or pros and cons, or in this case they're saying the extent to which you have the power. Make sense? Are we good? So in this kind of a question, you are basically required to um, um, you are required to give evaluation as well. So if we start this discussion, let's begin with first what may cause the fall in demand, and we may talk about fall in demand. Fall in demand can happen if this is a normal good and income go down, demand will go down. Another factor could be, what if the price of substitutes go down, then demand will fall. Similarly, price of complements could go up, demand will fall. Similarly, if you are looking at change in taste or advertising, the demand can fall. So you talk about first the factors that can make the demand go down. And then you talk about the diagram of how the demand going down will be shown in terms of a diagram. So let's say this is my demand and supply. We talk about how demand will fall. So you go to a lower price P1 and quantity Q0 to Q1. And then you talk about basically this important part. So, like for the first part of factors and diagram, you will get a good 6 marks to 8 marks for that discussion. But the next 6 marks will be all about discuss the extent to which chocolate producers have the power to stop this fall in demand to happen. And the answer to this one is basically, as a producer, where do you have the power and where do you have no power? So let's look at this, guys. Do you have a power in changing incomes of consumers? My question to you guys, do
No,
you
sir.
have the power?
No, sir.
No. So you talk about this, that you don't have the power to change the income of consumers. Yeah, what you can do is that if your good is normal in nature, you can make an inferior substitute to it. But otherwise, you don't have much power. So unless if you're making a normal good, don't have too much influence. However, you may, if the income is going down and your good is normal in nature, you may make an inferior good. But that is something you can react to it. But in terms of the factor, you don't have much of power. What about price of substitutes? If price of substitute is going down, do you have control over it? And the answer is, do we have a control
No.
over substitutes?
No, sir.
We may react to it by lowering our price also, but we don't have we may not have a control over price of substitutes or complements. Both of these factors we may not have control over it. We may react to it by lowering our price as well. For example, normally during any campaign, if Coke is reducing price, Pepsi will try to do the same. That's something which you could do, but you don't have control over it. Similarly, when you look at things like advertising, you have a strong control over it. So that's one thing. You can change the taste of the good by giving features, like giving features of the good, or advertising is something which you have a complete control over. Weather and external factors, you may not have no control.
So what about quality?
Quality, of course, quality comes in features, right? So you can say I can make my quality go up and therefore change the taste of people, therefore, and also use powerful advertising to talk about the quality and therefore make the demand go up. But so if you go back to this question, guys, you can pick 3-4 points and talk about which one is in the control of the firm, which ones are not. Make sense? Are we good? Discuss the extent to which chocolate producers have the power to stop this fall in demand happening. And the answer to this one is this, that what you can say this, that chocolate producers may have the power to affect the quality of their good, the marketing of their good, and also the features of their good, but they might not have control over factors like income or price of substitutes and complements, and external factors like weather. Make
Sir, I
sense?
had a question.
Yeah.
Sir, if they reduce the price, won't the real income increase for consumers?
If yeah, but like from only those people who are buying your good, they might find the real income to go up, right? But we're talking about income as an external, as a factor. So you are making the price to change income, but are we talking about income changes? What will happen to your demand?
Sir, so in the conclusion, we like need to tell all about the factors that the chocolate producers can influence and the factors they cannot.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, and the richer your discussion, the more you will get marks, because this is a 12-mark question. The evaluation will basically decide your grade, because the rest of the part is easy. Make sense? Are we good?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. So we had a really good discussion about equilibrium. So I'm going to send you this workbook of mine. Okay, and tomorrow's class I'm going to focus on um, elasticity. Okay, so a lot of the focus will be on elasticity of demand and of supply. My sort of request to you guys will be to like prepare the topic, demand supply, so we can only focus on the questions. Also, if you have any confusions, you can sort of bring that to the class. All those people who are here, you can write to me an email and I can respond back by sending you the file. Okay. I'm also going to give you an invitation to a platform called Mighty Network, where we will be sharing information and so on. Okay. Any questions, guys?
Okay, sir.
Do you have any questions before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else that you guys want to discuss about some topics? We are kind of like running out of time when it comes to the AS, because you guys have your exams coming sooner rather than later. You know what I mean? So that's a challenge that we have. So we got to sort of make sure that we, like do things faster and do things efficient.
So what about other subjects, sir?
What about the subject? What do you mean by that?
Sorry, sir?
You said something.